Hey there, listener. Corey Andrew Powell here, and I'm excited to share that Motivational Mondays is now sponsored by BetterHelp. Feeling stressed or anxious? Well, BetterHelp brings you online therapy that's convenient and affordable. NSLS members get 50% off your first month of BetterHelp when you sign up at betterhelp.com/NSLS or click the link in the show notes. Start your journey to better mental health today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Motivational Mondays. Today, we have an extraordinary guest joining us. That's Mr. Chester Santos, also known as the International Man of Memory. Chester is one of the greatest memory experts in the world, having captivated audiences from Fortune 500 companies to prestigious universities like UC Berkeley and Harvard. He's been featured on CNN, NBC, and ABC, as well as the pages of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. And he's also the 2008 memory champion and best-selling author. So memory champion is an actual thing. So he really, really knows his stuff. He is the memory champion. So we are so happy he's here today to join us. Mr. Chester Santos, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Thank you so much for having me, Corey. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yes, well, me too. I'm happy you're here and excited to talk to you as well. And I know we've been trying to do this for a while, but clearly based on the schedule I just laid out that you keep, it was a little hard to book this time, but we finally got you here because I know you're so busy. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And before we get started, I guess a little background about what you do and how you've come to become this international man of memory. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in becoming a memory expert and how'd you come to earn this title?
So it really started in undergrad, I would say. I was a psychology major at UC Berkeley. That's really when I started becoming interested in the brain, how the mind works, took many classes in earning that psychology degree in cognitive and biological psychology. So the interest was there. At some point, I saw a segment on ABC's 2020, that evening news program. They had a segment on the United States National Memory Championship. And it sparked my interest because people had often commented to me, wow, you have a really good memory. So I became interested in competing in this championship. But when I looked into what the best people in the country were scoring in the various events, memorizing hundreds of names, hundreds of digits, decks of playing cards perfectly in just a few minutes, I realized I wasn't on that level in terms of memory, although I was probably above average. So I started doing research. I read all the books that I could find on the topic, did a lot of online research, and played around with many different techniques, found what seemed to be working best for me personally until I honed in on the most effective techniques, stuck to training myself in that subset. And then eventually I was able to win the United States Memory Championship. It took years of practice and competing, but when I did win, I was able to luckily garner a lot of media attention, and then I leveraged that into speaking and training. And since winning that championship in 2008, I've gone on to give presentations in more than 30 different countries on how anyone can develop powerful memory skills and leverage those skills for more success professionally and personally, and as well as academically. So that's how I became the international man of memory.
That's amazing. And you talked a little bit about some of the actual I guess, activities, if you will, like remembering cards or multiple names. But what other things did you have to do in this competition for the memory championship? What were some of the other activities?
So in addition to memorizing names, playing cards, digits, there's poetry. We also, at some points, there were televised portions. And we had to remember things about people. So they would bring 7 random people onto the stage and they would rattle off their first name, middle name, last name, birth dates, resident, city, zip code, city, state, zip code, and a bunch of other pieces of information. They would randomly bring someone back out and say, okay, what's their city, state, zip code, what is her birthday, things like that. So they had not only remembering names, but other things about them. And now I really help professionals to become good at this so that you're getting more out of business networking. You're not getting the most out of attending business functions if the next time you run into somebody that you had previously met, you have no idea what their name is or what they do for a living. Definitely you will get more out of networking and build better relationships if you can better remember names and things about people.
Oh my gosh. I definitely have to get some of your techniques down because I'm in a situation now where I have these new neighbors and lots of new neighbors. And I don't know. I see one and I'm like, hey, Bob, Kevin, Steve, Fred. I'm hoping it's one of those four, when I say his name, and maybe I'll get lucky. It's hard to remember names, especially. So, I mean, what do you think for you was one of the more difficult tasks in that itinerary when it became, for you when you were in this competition? What was one of the most difficult challenges?
Well, really, many of the tasks were difficult because I needed to work on developing my creativity and imagination. I always considered myself to be more of a left brain, logical person. At one point, I worked in Silicon Valley as a software engineer. So I needed to work a little bit on the right brain because that is a huge part of the techniques that I ended up using to be effective in the competition. There are really three main principles that are very valuable to learn when you want to improve your ability to remember just about anything. One is visuals, coming up with a visual representation of what it is that you want to remember. So to give an example, I think that a lot of us can relate to, let's say, Corey, you go to a party and you're meeting a lot of new people there at this party. 2 weeks after it's over, you're talking with one of your friends that was also there. And your friend says, hey, Corey, do you remember that attorney that we met at the party a couple weeks ago? He's also a member of the golf club. As your friend is describing that person to you, a lot of times you can picture in your mind who they're talking about. Your friend can probably also picture who they're describing to you. But a lot of times, neither one of you can remember what the person's name was, right? But you can picture them. So this makes sense when you think about it, because when we're interacting with people in various ways, we actually see the face. The face is recorded into our visual memory, but the name is something more abstract to the brain. So one tip for getting better at names is to turn them into powerful visuals. So if I meet someone named Mike, I might picture a microphone. If I meet someone named Alice, I might picture a white rabbit because that reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. It sounds maybe a little bit silly, but it can be very powerful and effective. I'll actually open at conferences with naming hundreds of people in the audience and at corporate events after just hearing the name one time. But really coming up with that visual is important. Then you want to involve additional senses if you can from there. And then another part of this is that creativity and imagination, making it weird in some way. So maybe the white rabbit is a giant white rabbit and it's, starts to stomp on the person or something. I don't know, but make it crazy because there's a psychological aspect to human memory. We tend to remember things that are pretty crazy and out there extraordinary with little to no effort on our part.
That's really funny because I think most of us are really sort of terrified of the idea of losing our memory. I know for me, it's one of the most difficult things I could imagine someone facing. And we see a lot of commercials now promoting pharmaceuticals or even over-the-counter things. So not to put you on a spot when it comes to talking about medications, but I mean, is there a balance between what you're doing as far as actual exercises for memory and supplements, so they claim, that may help you improve your memory as well?
Really, my area is the exercises. So exercising your brain and specifically the memory muscle in your brain. So your brain is very trainable. The more you have your brain perform a particular function over and over again, the more it signals to your brain that that's something important that you need to be able to do. So your brain starts to find a way to make itself better at doing it, right? The brain is incredibly trainable. The opposite, however, is also true. And that is, if we are always writing everything down, always using electronic devices, never using our memory, what we're signaling to our brain is, hey, you know what? At this point, it's not important for me to be able to remember. So it makes sense that you are going to lose that memory ability over time, because the use it or lose it principle really does apply to memory. So my focus is on helping people to learn fun techniques that encourage, inspire you to use your memory, exercise that memory muscle. Supplements are not really my area. I can tell you what I learned about just in my own personal research, wanting to do my best competing in the US Memory Championship, but I want to make it clear to the audience that I'm not a doctor or scientist or anything, but really my research supports the concept that a healthy body equals a healthy mind. I think anybody would agree with that. So if you're not getting the daily recommended allowances of vitamins and minerals, if you think maybe your diet is a little poor, you might want to consider perhaps a multivitamin. We know that B vitamins are important for mental energy and concentration. If you are deficient in B vitamins, you're more likely to experience brain fog. And also, I think pretty much any doctor researcher would agree that omega-3 fatty acids are very important for proper brain function. So if you're lacking that in your diet, perhaps a fish oil supplement, some flaxseed perhaps as well, something with omega-3s. So I think those things are pretty well agreed upon. And those are some things that I found in my research when I was wanting to perform at my very best in the United States Memory Championship.
You know, I love this information because our community, it's college based, but it's academic based. Students, alumni, non-traditional students, your standard students who are just getting out of high school, but they all have that one thing in common. When they're in school, when we are all in school and doing our studies, there's a lot of memorization that has to go into play with our ability to really do well on tests. And it's not something everyone is good at. So I just sort of really want to say how excited I am to share some of this information with our audience, because you know, academia really, really requires memory in so many aspects for people to really do well. And I think for me personally, that was where I did the most poor in testing. I just couldn't remember stuff. You know, it was just so difficult to do. So do you ever come into communication with people who are having issues with studying? And maybe are there some techniques that can be utilized there, or is it the same principle?
Yes, absolutely. So memory is fundamental to learning and the acquisition of knowledge. So this is going to help university students, graduate students, also later on in your career when you engage in professional development activities. Your company sends you to trainings. You're really not getting the most ROI, return on investment, from all of this training and development if you're having difficulty remembering the information, right? When you can better retain and recall things, it really is going to have a profound positive impact on multiple areas of your life. So you can really improve this right away utilizing those three principles: visuals, using additional senses, and while you're doing that, make it all crazy unusual to take advantage of the psychological aspect to memory. I'd like, if you're up for it, Corey, to just go through an interactive exercise guiding your audience, and I'll leave it up to you if you want to see if you want to give this a try and recite these from memory, but really we'll do it all together. Myself, you, and the audience can follow along. I want everybody to try and commit to memory the following random list of words. It's going to be monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, and dollar. Now, when I have live audiences, when this is a conference presentation, I can see the look on people's faces. They're looking at me like, nope, not going to happen. There's no way I'll be able to remember that, not unless you give me a lot of time to do it. But in fact, Corey, you and everyone listening to this will have all of these words down perfectly forwards and backwards with just about 3 minutes of time that we spend on it. And believe it or not, weeks, even months after interviews, presentations, I get people messaging me on LinkedIn and Instagram and so on. They can't believe they still remember the words. So all you're going to do is listen to what I described to you, see and experience it happening in your mind, relax, have fun with this, smile, giggle through this. It's a good sign you'll remember. Monkey was the first word. So I want for you to just visualize in your mind with your eyes opened or closed, whatever's more comfortable for you in terms of visualization at this point. There is a monkey dancing around and it's making monkey noises. Whatever the monkey would sound like, right? The monkey now picks up a gigantic iron. So just see that like a little movie or cartoon playing in your head. This monkey is dancing around with a gigantic iron, and the iron starts to fall, but a rope attaches itself to the iron. And maybe even imagine that you feel the rope. Maybe it feels sort of rough. Interact with it, feel it. You look up the rope now and you see that the other end of the rope is attached to a kite. The kite is flying around in the air. Just again, relax, have fun, see this kite flying around in the air. That's all you need to do. You see now the kite crashes into the side of a house. Just see that happening in your mind. It crashes into the side of a house. The house, you notice, is completely covered in paper for some weird reason. It's totally covered in paper. Just see that. Out of nowhere, a shoe appears now and it starts to walk all over the paper. Maybe it's messing it up as it's walking on it. See that shoe. Picture that. Have fun with this crazy imagery. There's a shoe walking around. It smells pretty badly, so you decide to investigate and see why. So you look inside and you see a smelly worm crawling around inside of that shoe. See the smelly worm. Worm was the next word. That worm now jumps out of the shoe and it goes into an envelope. See it really going into the envelope. Maybe it's going to mail itself. I don't know what's going on there, but see the envelope. Out of nowhere, a pencil appears. Maybe it's going to address it. Just see that pencil writing all over the envelope. Visualize that. Again, everybody just relax. Visualize this. Have fun seeing that pencil. The pencil now jumps into a river and there's a huge splash like you would never expect to see when it hits the river. The river, you notice, is crashing up against a giant rock. And this rock flies out of the river and it crashes into a tree. I want you to see that rock crash into this tree. A lot of crashing and smashing going on, I guess, in this story here. Hits the tree. The tree, you notice, is growing cheese. Probably haven't seen a tree like that. Yeah. This one is growing cheese. And out of the cheese comes $1. I really want you to try and visualize that $1 coming out of the cheese. That was already the last word. It was $. Now I'm going to run through this with everybody in about just 30 seconds. That's it. 30 seconds, we'll quickly run through this and just replay through this little crazy story that you've created in your mind. I want for you all to see a monkey. The monkey was dancing around with what? See that iron, okay? Something attached to the iron. It was a rope. I want you to see and feel the rope.
Yes.
When you look up the other end, you see it's attached to a kite. Visualize that kite. The kite now, I want you to see it crash into the house. See it crash into the house. The house was covered in something. See the paper. You got it. See the paper. Something walked on it. I want you to see that shoe walking on it. Now, something small was crawling in the shoe. It was smelly. It was the worm. See that worm. The worm jumped into the envelope. Just visualize that happening. It's going into the envelope. Something wrote on the envelope, everybody. See that pencil. See the pencil. The pencil, then it jumped into a river. I want you to really see it go into the river with the splash. See the river. The river was crashing up against the giant rock. Picture the rock. The rock then flew into that tree. See it go into the tree. The tree was growing something. What was it growing, everybody? Cheese. And what came out of the cheese? See that $1. So you got it. So now it should be pretty easy for everybody following along to recall all of those random words now by just replaying through the little story that you've created in your mind. Each major object that you encounter in the story will give you the next word. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and give this a try, run through the story and see if you can recall all of the words. If you're missing any, just run through the story a couple more times. You would be able to recite this perfectly, forwards and even backwards. Corey, it's up to you if you
Unbelievable.
want to give it a try. I don't want to put pressure on you. You don't need to do it, but I'm sure you guys can get most of them if you just run through the story.
I mean, I just did it with you and I'm like teary-eyed right now because I have like the worst memory, and that was so amazing that, it's and sometimes in life you don't really have a lot of moments, ahas, that you can go, wait, that's a real aha. But I literally just went through every word with you as you told that story in the
Awesome.
recount. And I would have never thought that was possible. When you first said those words, I was like, monkey, cat, dog. I don't know what he's talking about. So that is fascinating. And I love that because it was quick. You said 3 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, we just about in 3 minutes memorized that. So, wow, Chester, mind blown. Thank you, sir. That was a great experiment. That was definitely a first here on Motivational Monday. So thank you for that. And, you talk about actually the memory, not just in its own sort of silo. You talk a lot about the brain as well, the power of the brain. And I love one thing that you mentioned too, when you talk about your most valuable business asset is your brain. Seems self-explanatory, but explain a little bit more of what you mean by that.
Really, it is true. Your brain is your most powerful business asset. Really, because in order to be successful in business, you need to be able to adapt, constantly learn new things, new technologies, the new things that are happening in the industry. And again, memory is fundamental to that learning and acquisition of knowledge. Also, building relationships is very important with people. To build relationships with people is very important. Again, networking. One of the first steps in making a new friend is learning to call them by their name. You can build, strengthen relationships. This also helps you to be a more effective and persuasive speaker. This could be a speech to potential investors, presentations to potential investors, or maybe it's a more intimate setting. You're just meeting one-on-one with a client or potential client, doing a little bit of research, 5, 10 key things that you learned about them and their business, 5 to 10 key ways as to how you and your services are a perfect match, some things maybe that you learned about their competitors in your research. Even this simple story method can be very effective for that. You would just create an outline of all of the major points and subpoints and build a little story to help you demonstrate that you have that knowledge, that expertise, that you've really researched and prepared for that meeting.
Yeah. I guess there's like no one way. I guess you can just find and utilize different things that work for you. And I'm thinking back to being a kid in choir class, and if someone had said, do you know all the 50 states? I would have been like, no. But then we learned a song that alphabetized them, and we sang all 50 states in this song. And to this day, and I'm, quite past elementary school days, but I mean, I can literally recite that, but it's because of the fact that I associate it with the song, just like the very famous educational series that was animated in the 70s and early 80s, Schoolhouse Rock. It's a brilliant thing that combine music and sort of like rhyme and visuals. And I think it taught a lot of kids, I know in my generation, taught us a lot about how our government works and parts of speech and math. And so I love that there's just, I get from you finding sort of whatever these methods are that make sense for you. And there's no wrong or right way, really.
Exactly. It's about making learning more fun. Mm-hmm. So this really provides people with a much more fun and interesting framework to learn things that might otherwise seem a little bit boring. Really, adding to your knowledge bank continuously is important to improve your potential for creativity and innovation. The more that you have stored in your knowledge bank, the more ideas that you can come up with, the more that you're limited in your knowledge, the more restricted you are in terms of being able to come up with new ideas. A quick example that I hope will illustrate this a little bit better, perhaps an oversimplistic example. But let's say you went on a vacation to Brazil and you tried a new fruit there, maracuya. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but maracuya is a fruit, and it's the first time you're having this. You think it's so delicious, amazing, and an idea pops in your head. Wow, this might be awesome in a pie. I think I'm going to create a maracuja pie, maybe open up a maracuja pie shop in the Bay Area. Hasn't ever been opened before. That idea that popped in your head as you were experiencing that pie was dependent upon the fact that when you were tasting the maracuja, you already knew, stored in your knowledge bank, what a pie is. Okay. If you didn't know what a pie was, if for some reason that wasn't in your knowledge, that's one idea that would be completely eliminated. Right. And I think that also illustrates how when you're tasting that pie, Google would not help you. You wouldn't think to Google pie, right? It's just a blank that you have there. So lack of knowledge will restrict your ability in terms of the amount of ideas you can create. But the more that's stored in your knowledge bank, again, the more ideas that can potentially be generated as you're experiencing new things throughout your life.
And I think that also speaks to another area for leadership, which is to go out and experience things. I mean, right? So many people, I mean, if you don't increase your experiences, to your point, like you can't increase that database because you're limited and closing yourself off to knowledge, which is, I didn't really realize that till now, which is kind of tied to memory because you know less. So you have fewer references. Is that sort of kind of a correlation that you would make with that?
Exactly. That's what I was trying to explain. You got it. I'm glad that my maybe overly simplistic example did the job of what I was trying to get across there. Yeah. So that's absolutely what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I love that you used international travel because very often on the show, I will speak with different guests and we go talk about some statistics and some that indicate that Americans travel less internationally than some other countries. And I think in many ways, we're just a very nationalistic, society. That's sort of how this whole country sort of evolved. And so you don't have a lot of people, shockingly enough, you don't have as many as you would think with passports. So I always draw that correlation too of like, get out into the world, see more, increase your knowledge. And I love that now I'm seeing a real great correlation between that brain health, memory. It's just so important just to get out and just do different things. Now you have a book as well, Instant Memory Training for Success.
Yes, I have a book, Instant Memory Training for Success. Another one, Mastering Memory.
Right.
Techniques to turn your brain from a sieve to a sponge. And I also have an online school, which is at memoryschool.net. You can visualize a giant fishing net to remember that it's .net. So memoryschool.net is the online school.
And so you finding that these books are almost like self-guided ways in which people can get information from you in the text and increase their memories, or are you finding that people are getting more from you when you're live and you're doing these exercises?
Well, it's always going to be best, I feel, live and in person. And the next best thing to that would be probably videos. So that's what the Memory School is, video training. So it's me on video talking to you and guiding you through interactive exercises. And then the next best thing after that would be, of course, reading the books and making sure that you follow through with actually going through the self-study of the exercises in the books. So.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, we'll make sure that we'll have links to all your current and your past literary works as well. And that makes me also curious about your work on a global level. And you've conducted workshops worldwide. So I do wonder, is there any sort of cultural difference or cultural differences that you've observed in how memory techniques are received and applied around the world? Or do you see similarities? Are we all processing and digesting info the same way? Or what's your observation there?
I really think that learning is very similar across cultures, although some may already be more naturally inclined towards visual learning. For instance, Chinese characters, when they're learning to read, the Chinese characters already look sort of like images, might automatically invoke imagery as they're learning that. So that's an example of one difference. In the US, maybe we're not so much naturally inclined towards learning visually, but really my systems are largely visual based. And I will say that no matter what your best mode of learning may be right now. So let's say you're more auditory, which I was to begin with. I was more of an auditory learner and weaker probably in the visuals. You can develop that area that you might be a little bit weaker in. I really developed my visualization ability and the creativity and imagination with the training and the practice.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier too, which is really important. With the rise of digital technology, and not even the rise, I mean, we are now completely immersed in a digital society, digital world. So we rely heavily on our devices. Obviously, we just talked about that as well. So I'm wondering, like, what do you think is the role of memory skills in an evolving world of digital information, when it's almost like people would think, well, why do I have to learn so much? I can just go to Google. I can just go to my, stored phone numbers and hit the number one and it'll call the number for me. So why would you advocate for people that memory is still important?
Yeah, so I would say two things. One, I think there's a bit of a danger in this digital dependency. The use it or lose it principle, as I mentioned earlier, does apply. Two quick examples: phone numbers. We used to be able to remember the phone numbers of so many friends, family members growing up. My parents would give me emergency numbers that they thought were important for me to know in case of emergency. A lot of people were able to do that, but nowadays you give somebody even one phone number and they feel paralyzed in their ability to remember even one number. It's getting so bad that you have people out there today that don't even know their own phone number. Really, they don't. If you ask them their number, they have no idea. They have to pull it up on their phone. Oh, there it is. You can write it down. And navigation is another quick example. You have people that have been driving in a city for 5+ years, but if something is wrong with the network connection in that particular area, or something's wrong with the app, they have to pull over, restart their phone a bunch of times, hope that the issue will resolve itself, or else they won't even be able to navigate to what should be pretty well-known landmarks in the city after having lived there for many years. I think those illustrate what happens when you completely turn off your brain and you're 100% dependent on technology. It reaches a point to where it becomes scary what we're not able to remember when we feel that we really need to. So that's one thing I want to get across. The second is that, because if we're honest with ourselves, the average business professional out there is not using their memory much at all because of the digital dependency. This actually opens up an opportunity for you to be much more impressive. So if you will work on your memory skills even to a small degree, it's much more noticeable, much more impressive. I think it's an opportunity for you to become more memorable in business if you can give a presentation without notes or minimal notes. If you are remembering the names of most of the people that you're meeting at business functions, people are going to notice it and you're going to be very impressive. People will start talking about you in a positive way.
Right. Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah. I mean, it gives you the one up, if you will, in a very competitive landscape. And at the NSLS, we talk about that a lot too, when we call them soft skills, or some would say they're durable skills. It depends on, the person you ask, but it is those tangible things, communication, being able to, even things like making eye contact in conversation, memorization, collaboration, listening, all those things. Just, you're right. Those things cannot be really replaced, at least not yet. I mean, AI is getting pretty close. Getting kind of scary in the AI world. But yes, I love that you stress the importance of those things. And let's also, again, everyone listening, make an effort to remember more phone numbers. Because I think, Chester, what I'm getting from you too is that's almost the dying of a muscle that's happening, because I can't remember phone numbers like I used to as a kid when it was, before cell phones. And is that because I haven't had to for so long? So now my ability to do so is even more impaired.
You got it. Exactly. I totally agree with that. It is the dying of the memory muscle in your brain. And one thing that I ask people to do when they ask me, what's something that I can do on a daily or weekly basis to exercise my memory? And what one thing I recommend is the phone numbers of friends, family members, colleagues that you find that you're regularly calling just at least commit those to memory. And when you need to call them, first rely on your memory. All right. If for some reason you're extra tired that day, you didn't get enough sleep, or you're stressed and you can't remember the number, only then rely on the auto dial from the address book. But try to rely on your memory first. This way, every day when you're calling people, you'll be working a bit on that memory muscle. Maybe one credit card number that you use a lot for online purchases, perhaps committing that to memory. Again, the idea is something that you find you're regularly doing, make use of your memory there if you can.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful advice and words of wisdom from Mr. Chester Santos, our guest today, the international man of memory, author, and actually a champion. I mean, champion in the membership, the memory game. And so we're so happy you're here today to join us on Motivational Mondays. Thanks for being here, Chester.
Thank you so much for having me, Corey. Thank you.